it's not, Petros isn't even a Greek word, or I mean a Greek name. We think of it as a Greek name because Petra is a Greek word, but languages borrow words from each other all the time, especially when they're smacked against each other for a long time. So Petra is attested in Hebrew long time ago, and they just absorbed it and would start talking and using that instead of whatever Tsur would be the Hebrew word for this mountain or big rock. Okay, Tsur. But instead of saying Tsur, they say Petra. Why? I don't know. They chose it. So it becomes a Hebrew word. And in case you might want to think that Petros, no, Petros is a Greek name. Nobody would call their kid Petros because it would be a stupid name, Rock. And if you don't think that's true, look at how always in the Gospels they call him Petros, but as soon as he leaves the country where they speak Hebrew and goes to the place where native Greek speakers are, they hurry up to not call him Petros anymore, but call him Kepha, his Aramaic name. They never call him Petros up there. No one would take him seriously. Come listen to my friend Rock. I found that pretty interesting, that they never use his Greek name when he's in Greek-speaking territory. They only use his Aramaic name there.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Okay, what you just said with the K sound.
Kepha, yeah.
That's Cephas.
Well,
Cephas is how you
see,
see it.
that's how we get into when we
like
get into transliteration, we'll understand that better. Because right now,
what's Simon? Where does
well,
that
Shimon,
one come in?
his Hebrew name is Shimon.
Okay.
Okay, and
His
so
name
was
that he
20% of the
given
population.
when he was born, you mean?
Yeah, because it says actually in the Gospels, it says Yeshua gave him the name Petros.
Right.
Right.
He called him Petros. Maybe because he knew what was going to happen. I don't know.
So what is Kephas or Cephas? What is that?
Kepha is Aramaic for rock.
Oh.
Yeah. And Cephas is just writing Kepha with Greek characters, and then somebody not knowing better when it goes into Latin, and then those letters are the same when you read English, and then you read it, oh, Cephas.
Which is how we got Jehovah.
Yeah, and other strange things.
Yeah.
It's all very odd.
It's all very odd.
First name.
That's why we're looking at it.
Rock. But why use that when you're in the Greek instead of his
You're not calling him
Hebrew
Rock.
name?
Because in those...
You're calling him his...
Well, we do that now. I mean, there are
a
some
Greek version.
there are some names that just mean stupid things, but when you say it and it's not in your language, you think it sounds like a cool name.
Here's an example. Okay, this is a real example. Some friends of mine are living permanently now in China, and they're running some kind of a school. When non-Western people think that they want to Westernize their family, that's an upgrade somehow, they want to absorb Western culture. So this family was going to send their son to this American school that my friends are running, okay? So she wanted to give her son a Western name, a good Western name. So she comes and introduces, this my son, he named Fork. She called him Fork. That was going to be his name. Good English word. We don't want to stick with this Chinese name. We're gonna go Western. I want him to have a good Western name. His name is Fork. Okay? And my friends were trying to tell her, oh, you don't want to name him Fork. Here, look, this is a fork. You don't want to name him Fork. That would just be silly. Or it's not a name anyway. You don't want to call him Fork. His name's Fork. You call him Fork. Okay. Well, if you have a choice, perhaps when he grows up and learns more and travels to America, perhaps he won't insist on being called Fork. When he comes here, he might use his Chinese name. Or pick another name like Dan or something. Right? So that's a real example of somebody picking a nonsense name as a name. And then when you go to the language where that name comes from, you certainly won't use it, because it would just be retarded. Okay. That's kind of what's going on with Petros here. When you go to the language where anyone would know what that means, it's just like, No, we're not gonna use that name.
That's its common usage.
Yeah, we're gonna use my name Kefa. We'll go with that.
Ah.
Okay. One more Hebrew thing. The letter Vav. The letter Vav by itself in Hebrew, it's never by itself. It's always slapped onto the front of the word. It's like a prefix, and it means and. And this happened, and then they went here. This and that. But while it means and, it almost never means and. It means anything but and. It can mean but, to, also. I mean, it means a lot of things. And sometimes and. But if you're going with that and it's and all the time, it's going to show up. You're going to take your word for and you're going to throw it in. And in the Greek New Testament, we have kai or ke all the time, over and over, which no Greek writer would ever do. People don't talk like that. They wouldn't. It's ridiculous. But in Hebrew, it's normal. So here's a verse. And here's its translation, common translation. Any man who divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery. Sounds pretty cut and dry. So let's put the, and here's an example of literal equivalency, okay? One word for one word. That would be pretty much literal equivalency, okay? So we're checking out each of these words just to make sure that's what it says. All who divorce the wife of self and marry another commit adultery. Sounds pretty, I guess that's right. Well, that's a tough one. But in Hebrew, and doesn't have to mean and often, very, very, it's not like an exception. It often doesn't mean and, but it can mean to. So let's make that change. All who divorce the wife of self to marry another commit adultery. Does that change the meaning of the passage?
Oh, yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
And it even makes more sense why it would be adultery. Well, that's only changing one, actually, you could say it's only changing one small word, but really it's only changing the understanding of one small letter. And yet it vastly overturns the common meaning of the verse. And if you want another verse for where the vav is used in that exact way, Genesis 14:23 says, and this is when Avram is talking to the king who's trying to give him all this treasure. He says, I will not accept so much as a thread, or even the thong of a sandal belonging to you, and you will not be able to say, it is I who made Avram rich. So I'll read that again with our change. I will not accept so much as a thread or the thong of a sandal belonging to you, so that you will not be able to say, it is I who made Abram rich. Right? That's the change we just made. All who divorce their wife so that they can marry another commit adultery. One tiny change, one big result. And just as my own personal side note, Torah, we need to get away from thinking of Torah as law. Torah does not mean law. Torah means divine instruction. It may mean law, but it doesn't automatically, it's not the word for law, but we read it, it's always law. It's never anything else besides law.
Or
it's awful.
Yeah, or like you said, a guidance or instructions.
Yeah.
It's the law.
Now, in a sense, the king's word is law, but that doesn't mean when the king tells a story to his children that that's the law, right? Any more than the entire first book of the law, the Torah, is a story. Well, how much of a law code are we going to build out of that?
Well, with law, you make the association, too, of this or consequence.
Exactly.
This or consequence.
Exactly.
This or consequence. Right and wrong.
So that's just something I think we need to get out of our mind. Let's do a little bit more translation. We talked about idioms. So let's look at an idiom. Now when we're doing Bible study and we want to get to the original languages and we want to look up the meaning of a word, what's the first thing we grab?
Lexicon.
Lexicon. And we go, let's look up that word and see what it means.